presentation of you, although I follow you for the fundamental rights and the rule of law. Thanks, you are extremely proactive in the European Parliament. So let's focus on this. Very happy to have this exchange with you. And shall we start now? If Fernando and Domenech are also. Fernando, I think, is here, but I don't see Domenech. Yes. Let me know if we can start now, or shall we wait 2 minutes more?
Up to you, Daphne.
Let's see if my president is also here, Domenech. Okay, 2 minutes more, please, and then we will start.
Okay, nice.
Good evening to all of you here from
Hi.
Switzerland. Hello.
Hello.
Daphne, can you check your WhatsApp, please?
Oh, sorry. So I think we can start. Good afternoon from Brussels. I'm Daphne Gogo, a member of the UF Executive Bureau, and I'm also a member of the board of the World Federalists. I'm a lawyer. I have the honor to share the discussion for this third seminar on the global ventenne. And in particular dealing with global Green Deal based on the European experience we have with the European Green Deal. I would like first to give the floor to the president of the World Federalist Movement, Professor Fernando Iglesias, and then to Domenech Devesa, the president of the UF, who is also a member of the European Parliament. So Domenech is connecting now. So Fernando, you have the floor.
Thank you, Daphne. Thank you, Guido, for the organization, and the European Federalists for this very interesting topic to be raised at the international level. Global Green Deal, well, I would say first that climate change particularly is one of the three big existential threats that menace humanity, together with artificial intelligence and nuclear war, the most clear menaces that our humanity is facing now. And as the other ones has something very clear, they have a central element in common, which is that the international management and the regional management of this crisis is not enough. It's not enough because they are global crisis. So regionalism is important, of course, and the attitudes and policies developed by the European Union are crucial and are very, but they are not enough because we had many examples of pollution and violation of the ecosystem by China and Russia and other. So we need, and this is a general observation I used to make to European Federalists. You know that I am, as a president, one of my basic policies is the need of working together, the World Federalists and the European Federalists. It's that European crises are not European. European crises are global. And this is one of the big challenges that have to face the European Union, to consolidate the regional union, but at the same time to promote certain policies at the global level. And climate change and global Green Deal is clearly among the most important ones. The second one is about internationalism is not enough. Why? Because if we had a table to discuss the protection of the human life and the ecosystem, the global ecosystem, and we had a representative of the United States, another one from Brazil, another one from China, from China, the representative of the United States is going to defend big cars. And the representative of Brazil is going to defend that they need to develop, to put down Amazonas. And the representative of China will say, well, you have industry, we need to pollute the, etc., etc. And this is why internationalism is not enough, because the problem is to put in the first place the common interest, the interest of humanity, and then consider the national interest. And that's why we need something which must be global. I remember when I was a child, I was a fan of Carl Sagan, Cosmos. Maybe you have read Cosmos, great anticipation. And the last page of Cosmos is about this. Sagan asks, we know, he says, he wrote, we know who speaks on behalf of nations, but who speaks on behalf of humanity? Who speaks on behalf of planet Earth? And this is a real question, that why we federalists are here, both the European Federalists, both the World Federalists, because we need to speak on behalf of humanity and the common interest of humanity. We need to speak on behalf of Earth. And I'm closing with the role of the World Federalist movement and the European Federalist movement. I mean, we build institutions. If we did something right in our history, it was our contribution to the building of the European Union, and particularly the European Parliament. This is a Spinelli European tradition, but also at the global level, the International Criminal Court is maybe the most important contribution of the World Federalist movement to the war. Well, we need to think about this. What can we do at the level of accord about the global Green Deal, and what can we do at the level of parliaments? We had this initiative. I wrote a paper together with Andreas Bummel about why a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly will be crucial in the development of a global policy with democracy and legitimacy at the global level in order to impose the common interest of the protection of the ecosystem before national interest, before corporative interest, etc., etc. So I hope this seminar will be fruitful in this direction, in the direction of building better institutions in order to have more Europe and more global governance in all these matters that affects our future, these existential risks we need to face right now. Thank you very much, and congratulations for the activity.
Many thanks, Fernando. Dominic, would you like to take the floor? I already present you, a member of the European Parliament from the Socialists and President of the the Union of European Federalists.
Thank you, Daphne. I'm happy to take the floor if it's the right moment and you give it to me. Very well. First of all, thanks a lot for the initiative and for the invitation to be part of this important event, which is a joint event of the World Federalist Movement and the Union of European Federalists. I'm particularly happy to be able to join Daphne, of course, but also my good friend and president of World Federalist Movement, Fernando Iglesias. Happy to see also my colleague in the European Parliament, Gwendoline Delbos Corfield. We worked a lot together in Libe on rule of law matters and also in the Spinelli group. And I'm happy to see that you are also connecting with this more global governance dimension. And there are other friends also that I'm seeing, Guido Montani, and also the person without the name, but I know her, which is a collaborator of Fernando. So when we were together in Ventotene, Fernando and myself, we said that we wanted to strengthen the cooperation of the two organizations. And I think it's, I think this event is also an example. We have to do more events together, because if we think as federalists, and I'm sure Gwendoline will also agree because she's a committed federalist in the European Parliament, we are talking about dealing with transnational challenges. And of course, transnational challenges are not limited to European challenges. As Fernando was summarizing, if we think of climate change, for instance, it is not enough with having a climate neutral Europe. This will not be of much use, given the fact that I think we are responsible of the 7% of total global emissions. If my numbers are not wrong, but if China, India, Brazil do not commit to carbon neutrality, then we are not achieving much. So this is a good example. But there are others. If we think of the pandemic also, of course, we are very proud that we managed to do the common purchase of vaccines at the European level, and that we jumpstart the health union. For the first time, the EU is becoming active in this field. But once again, I mean, managing the pandemic is a global challenge. It's not only a European challenge. It's not helpful to deliver vaccines to North America and Europe and not to the South or to the developing countries. And the anti-pandemic measures cannot be limited to a certain part of the globe. We also need, for sure, a global pandemic treaty, in my view. Let's think of other topics one very dear to Fernando, no? The fight against organized crime. Fighting organized crime in Europe, strengthening Europol, for instance, it will be important and helpful. But we know that if we are not able to fight effectively organized crime in Latin America or in other parts of the world, well, we are not going to be really effective, no, in managing this this challenge. If we think of the digital challenge, once again, we can have the best regulation in Europe. If we think of the Digital Society Act, of course, it is true. Since we have a big internal market, it is true that we can be, as Europeans, standard setters, and we are forcing, to some extent, for instance, US multinationals, no, to comply with our rules on on data protection, no, on privacy, and so on. Now we have approved a regulation on artificial intelligence, the first one in the world, and this probably can have a good impact in terms of, as I said, setting standards. But we cannot expect that we can really lead always by example or by saying, okay, if you don't comply with our rules on data, on artificial intelligence, on robotics, and so on, you cannot come to the internal market. This can go only so far. So those are, I think, just a few examples. We can think also of the migration challenge. Of course, it's good that we have agreed the Asylum and Migration Pact, because for the first time we have made mandatory a principle of solidarity in managing migration flows, which did not exist before in the European Union. So now the arrivals in the border, in the southern border, which up until now are the sole responsibility of Spain, Italy, and Greece, and Malta, now it's a common responsibility for the first time. And well, this example maybe is a bit controversial because I know the Greens were not supportive of the deal, because it is true that we have given ground on the question of the procedures that are now more accelerated and maybe less discriminative in the right sense of the word. But I just give it as an example. We can discuss with Gwendoline or other Green colleagues the details of the pact, in which ones we agree and we don't agree. But the fact that it's dealt with at the European level, I think it's an improvement from that point of view. But once again, if we don't establish common frameworks with developing countries, with the countries of origin, with the countries of transit, and not only, in my view, but this is of course more a policy question than a structural question, not only to say we're giving you money for your Coast Guard and security orientation and police and control, but we have, frameworks that are more oriented towards partnership and development and so on, then again, it is a regional challenge. I wouldn't even say an opportunity, because certainly in Europe, with our demographic winter and our rural depopulation, we need migrants. So I certainly will not characterize this as a problem, but as an opportunity. But okay, we need, I think, also ideally some global management of this public good, migration as the others. So this is why we cannot be, in my view, Eurocentric federalist. We have to be European and global federalist at the same time. I think that this is also important because the EU can play an important role in advancing a global governance agenda in order to manage these global public goods in a more federal way, also using the European foreign policy. So I think a good achievement for us, if we think a bit of a division of labor between UEF and World Federalist Movement, is precisely that we succeed as UEF to convince the EU institutions, and in particular the Commission, the High Representative, that it should be part of the European foreign policy to achieve certain goals that go beyond advancing our interests as Europeans in the world. No? That means that we have to support the reform of the UN. For instance, I think it should be a goal of the European Union to support the Parliamentary Assembly of the United Nations. That means supporting the reform advocated by Antonio Guterres of the UN, but going forward, going beyond, because he's not, as far as I know, focusing on the UNPA. We need as EU also to support Fernando's project of the COPLA, of the regional court in Latin America to fight organized crime. We have, of course, it is true, already the EU has supported since the beginning the International Criminal Court, which is a federalist project because it's to develop a global court on criminal matters. And for sure, coming now more to the topic of today, we have to support the globalization of the Green Deal. So we have the European Green Deal. I'm particularly proud of what we have done in Europe in this topic, because it was my party, PSOE, who put the idea of a European Green Deal in its platform for the European elections in 2018. And then when von der Leyen asked for the trust of the European Parliament to be elected, and this was important because this also showed that we were becoming more and more, even though, of course, we need to do more things, as surely Gwendolyn, as colleague of the Spinelli Group, will agree, that but that we are moving more and more towards a parliamentary democracy in Europe, because von der Leyen, in order to be elected, she needed our votes. In this case, I mean, speaking of the Socialist Group, without us, she couldn't be elected. And we made some conditions for her election. The directive on minimum wages, which has been delivered. The directive on gender violence, which it's in the process, I think, of being finalized. The migration pact. But we also required the European Green Deal as a condition to vote for her. And by the way, this was not very easy, because if you see in the European People's Party, there are important parts of the EPP that are not happy with that. And now, even with the farmers' movement and so on, they are kind of clearly calling for a suspension or a pause or a slowing down on all the regulations, proposals for regulations on the Green Deal. So for a center-right politician, I think that was a big concession at the time. But as I said at the beginning, the European Green Deal is not enough. We need a global Green Deal. So we need really a UN-sponsored plan, because, of course, we have the is ODS in English, the Global Development Goals. What's the name? The UN. The Sustainable Development Goals, right? The Sustainable Development Goals, which is the framework in which we operate. But there we have the fight against climate change, but we have to be more specific, in my view, which is to achieve climate neutrality at the global level. That's why it's so important to have a global Green Deal. As I said before, it's not enough having a climate neutral Europe. It's not enough. Apart from the fact that in a global Green Deal, we are going to need also to look at biodiversity. So it's not only about fighting emissions. Maybe this is the central plank, but also biodiversity. And we need the financing, because we know in the EU, the ecological transition or the green transition is estimated. There are different estimates, but the one by the European Commission is 700 billion euros per year. And all this cannot only come from private finance. We are going to need public investments. And we are thinking, okay, let's make next generation EU, the first instance of EU debt issued to finance not only loans, but also transfers. We need to make this permanent at the European level. So we have, on a permanent basis, the possibility to issue debt to finance this investment for the green transition. And we will need a similar thing at the UN level. So maybe through the IMF, through the special drawing rights, we need, I think, some sort of global financing tool, global public financing tool that could be maybe done through World Bank and IMF debt issuances to provide particularly developing countries, with the possibility to finance their part of their green transition, because of course we are richer, so we don't rely, or we as Europeans, we can do it ourselves. We should do it ourselves, but we need to help using the UN financial institutions, IMF and World Bank, to help the South and the developing countries to finance their green transitions. So with this, I think I have given you already some key ideas. I will just finalize with an announcement, which I think it's also important in terms of our cooperation, that I'm sure Fernando will agree. We start today with a series of common or joint events on global topics, bringing together UEF and World Federalist Movement. But I think we should go beyond, and taking into account also the suggestions by Professor Montani, I think it would be great if we can set up a joint working group between UEF and World Federalist Movement on global governance. And there we can tackle the justice dimension, the environmental dimension, global Green Deal, and financial and monetary aspects. I think this could be a good thing. We just had a meeting of our EB, Executive Bureau of UEF on Monday, and I made this proposal to propose to the World Federalist Movement this joint working group with people from the two organizations
Le
interested.
applicazioni sono quelle che si vedono tipo file, salva.
And I take the opportunity to announce to you that the EP endorsed this proposal to propose to the World Federalist Movement that we establish this joint working group, if you agree, on global governance. I hope this can be accepted, and with that we can continue our work in order to be more concrete, to issue a paper or a report with concrete ideas on a more federal global governance, which is what we need, which means managing these transnational challenges by way of democratic institutions, or by way of democratically and parliamentary democratically legitimated decision making, and also with the participation of a parliamentary pillar. This is what I understand by global federalism. That we manage public goods, and we do it with the participation of democratic and parliamentary institutions. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Many thanks, Domenech, for this ambitious program and your announcement. I give the floor. Fernando would like to have the floor.
Yes, please. First, I wish to repeat my gratitude to all of you and to say hi to other friends like Bob and Joe Leinen. I'm saying Joe here, a real activist for decades on these topics. Of course, I welcome the Domenech's proposal. We had a methodology that at the World Face movement that could be also interesting, which is the creation of transnational working groups. This is our official name we use. Let's be in contact, Domenech. You know, we have only to have a phone call. And of course, I welcome the initiative. This is what we need in order to work together in a permanent basis. And I have to say goodbye, because this is my office in the parliament, and I have a meeting in some minutes. And unfortunately, I have to leave the meeting not without listening what Joe has to say, because he raised his hand.
Many thanks, Fernando. Joe Leinen, please take. You have the floor.
Yeah, hi. Happy to see you all. You know that this topic, climate, is close to my heart since 40, 50 years, and Europe is close to my heart since I'm born. So these are the two pillars on which I worked over the last 50 years. Now, to be short, happy to have this together, WFM and UAF. And I think there's a real case for federalism. The climate issue, the environmental issue, is a true global public good, as Domenech was pointing out. And it takes a long time, but I think it is in the way we are thinking that it has to come. To build institutions, to build capacities, and to build as well monitoring and sanction systems, because we are living really in one boat with the global resources, the natural resources. And therefore, I think that's a main topic for us to deal with in the coming years. I'm on another forum as well, the Global Governance Forum, preparing the Summit for the Future next September in the UN. And I think that's a perfect date as well to look on. Good, you know how the UN is working. It will not really change the world at once, but maybe there is a process opened for reforming the UN Charter and having more, let's say, global federal elements in it. The World Parliament was mentioned, a World Citizens Initiative, something like this, more on the financial equity in the world. So I think a joint working group would be a perfect starting point to tackle these big challenges. And I'm in the house of my sister, which is in Paris, who is in Paris to make some warming. So you see me in a strange light, but that's the living room here. Fernando, bye-bye in your parliament.
Many thanks, Joe Leinen. So I would like now, before giving the floor to our key speaker, the main speaker for the third seminar, to thank one more Guido Montani, who is the initiator of all these, let's say, initiatives concerning a global Green Deal. And who prepare the old material for the seminars we have organized till now, and who is also the core of our, let's say, the initiator of a lot of other initiatives concerning the cooperation between both organizations, the European Federalists and the World Federalists. So I would like now to give the floor to Mrs. Del Bosso Corfield, saying that you are a member of the Green in the European Parliament. You are also a member of the Spinelli Group. You are very active in the area of issues related with environment, but also on rule of law. This is a key issue to include in our governance concerning the environment. Allow me also to mention that your group is also, let's say, the motor at the European Parliament for a very important initiatives. I'm referring to corporate sustainable due diligence, will change completely the way that the companies will impact the environment. They will perceive the environmental impact. This is also a key element to take into consideration for the next period, because I think if we succeed in a few weeks' time to have an agreement on this very ambitious proposal at European level, we will complete the European Global Green Deal with a new additional element that it will be really create a package concerning the way that we will perceive not only the protection of the environment, but also the development at global level. It will create a kind of model at a wider global level. Saying that, I will give you the floor for your presentation, mentioning also that the Green have done a few days ago, they have finalized the European Congress in view of the June elections, and you have adopted already very ambitious proposal concerning in the area of environment, but also wider concerning the impact of the environmental, the different dimension of the environmental crisis, and the way that we have to review our approach in order to come with a completely different, let's say, policy development in the near future. Well, I will give you the floor, and it will be very interesting to listening to you. Thanks.
Yes, hello, thank you everyone. So yes, indeed, I'm since I've been in this parliament, I've been working much more on rule of law issues and discrimination issues and civil liberties. Being a member of LIBE, but of course I was before local elected person, and I also participated for 2 terms in the executive bureau of the executive committee of the European Green Party. So all of this is quite familiar for me. I think we should not forget that 2019 we were very much helped by the results of the elections and by the big climate march, and by the figure of someone like Greta Thunberg, for example, the youth engagement, the youth participation in election. And so when we arrived in 2019, what the Greens had been saying for a long time, but more and more other people were saying, of course, in other groups, and also civil society was saying, was finally heard, because as Dominic said, some of the decisions that Ursula von der Leyen took and some parts of her program were not at all, of course, the core normal program of a central right or even right politician. But I think that there was a great awareness of the situation because of these youth marches. And once again, these youth marches were very strong in Europe, in a certain number of countries, but they were in fact all over the world. And the youth climate people, they really, since the beginning also, you know, put on the table the world aspect and the global aspect, and how we needed to work this together. We, the Greens, and I think that it's also something that the Federalists would agree on, I've always thought that EU was, of course, the good dimension, the exact wide scale to work on these issues. As it was said by Fernando Iglesias, of course, we can not only tackle climate change in one part of the world, but we also need to have regulations that have big range and not just little spaces. And the great interest of EU is to have these big frameworks that then we ask on the local level to be put in place. And it has often functioned very well, even if we see that it's not completely efficient. I mean, we have pollution rules for a very long time framework, and then a number of our cities in France, for example, are not at all at the level, and they just pay a fine. So it's not a miracle, but it is quite an efficient way of working to have this framework on a range like EU, and then having implementation on the local level. And also EU had already, of course, all of the competencies we needed in energy, industrial file, environmental rulings that can be made on EU level, but also agriculture, because yes, indeed, agriculture is today a polemic topic, but it is still a very big issue when you think about pollution. So we still need to tackle the agricultural question. So when Ursula von der Leyen was elected, she put all of this in her program. She was quite ambitious about it. We, the Greens, were criticizing some aspects, and we went on during all the mandate, because of course this is our core values and our core fight since the beginning of Green parties. But we also recognize, and I remember when I was not in this parliament, and I would talk to my colleagues, MEPs, and they were fighting for very little numbers. They were fighting for 25, and they were hoping maybe a bit more. And then the final numbers that we got for the Green deals were so much higher than what had never been discussed before. So this is, of course, a great achievement. And then the COVID situation, and later the pandemic situation, and then later the Ukraine and the push that it gave on energy question, and that energy was not even anymore just a climate issue, but was a geopolitical issue, and it really put a focus on this. All of this has mean a lot of advancement. Of course, what is difficult for a Green, but I guess from some of you also, even if you're not Green because you read about this, is that the sad thing is also that at the same time the decline of situation has accelerated, and the planet is becoming less and less, is becoming more and more in difficulty, and scientists are talking about big acceleration. The GIEC people are making today very, very, very concerning statements. And at the same time, on a European level, on the European democracy point of view, if we think about from the institution side of view, we did do big achievements in this term. So that's always a bit the difficult moment we are in. These crisis moments are always difficult for that. And I think that what is very interesting during this term is also that because of the pandemic and then Ukraine, and also with this first beginning with the climate march and what was promised, for the first time there was really this sense of working for all Europeans, as was said by Dominic, speaking on behalf of everyone, speaking, and Fernando Iglesias also, okay, for the moment it's more speaking on behalf of European people and not on complete total humanity, but it's also to be a leader on this for the rest of the world. So you could say that it is the case, and going really far from the selfishness of the monetary crisis times and the Greek crisis and all of this, where really EU showed gave the image of very selfish state nations. And this time, yes, this beginning of term with the big ambitions, then the pandemic, the way we reacted, and then the Ukraine, and a certain number of achievements in Green New Deal has shown, I think, a sense of speaking for all Europeans. But of course, we are now coming, and I think that this is what is one of our problems. We are now coming to a halt with threats. Dominic said it. We have people on the right of this parliament that are today very frightened by a number of acceleration that we gave. In fact, even if for me Greens it's not enough, it is a threat for some of my colleagues. And even more, we have this big fight that the next parliament will be very reactionary on a certain number of topics, rule of law, gender issue, but also on environment issues. So could we even come back? We have a number of problems. I think that it's very clear that we have work to do on social compensation, because we have seen this poverty come up, and then this is, of course, one of the things that some people are talking about. You know, you are making this big regulation on energy, you are making energy expensive and all of this, and how are people supposed to cope? So we really need to progress on social dimension, and we didn't enough in this term. Very clearly, this was the lacking ambition. We also need to think this poverty question on a global scale, because indeed what we do not want is EU. I mean, I hope that that's not what we want, EU to become this high efficient energy, clean energy, very top things where and keep all the nasty work and all the polluting industries and all of the problem with extractions of everything that we need for the renewables. And we know that we need to extract a lot from the other parts of the world. And then we would do this little EU fortress. So not only a fortress against migrants, but a green fortress, and then have other places of the world that we use and pollute in a very in a continuation of the colonialist moments. So we do need to have this in mind, specifically in these green issues, because we do have this tendency to think that, okay, we're going to get everything new, we're going to have these high tech industries, and then we forgot about how we make all of this happen, and then we could have making big damages in the rest of the world. We also have to think about how this big space of reglementation, and I fight for that. I really think that wanting a good functioning European democracy is wanting reglementation at this level, and we shouldn't shy from it as federalists. So we should say, it's good when we have this big space of reglementation on artificial intelligence that has never existed in the entire world, and even USA is copying us on certain things. If tomorrow we have space of reglementation for energy, for new industries and all this, it is also very good, but we also, of course, need to see how this can be seen as threats and not always as opportunities, and how we help economic transformation, so that we don't also in our own space, the EU, have these places where there's no jobs anymore and there's nothing to do, and we have these very desperate people. To finish, I want to say that, not to finish, but as a third part, I wanted to really put the focus on three aspects. As a feminist, I really want to specifically talk about the gender perspective of the Green Deal. I think that in most of our minds today and the way that we think public policies, we do have the social aspect. For a long time, environment was thought on one side, social on the other side, and they were very separate issues. I think today, all of the people working on this have always in mind this thing that you need to think the two together. So you call it just transition, you call it social compensation, but we really have this in mind that the most vulnerable of us are the ones suffering the most of the pollution and all of the planet problems. But also then when we find solutions, sometimes these solutions are even more endangering these same vulnerable people. So that I think we have in mind. But we often forget, for me, what would be the third pillar, which is gender perspective. We have been working, for example, in the Green European Foundation and also in Parliament, and there's been a resolution, own initiative resolution a bit earlier, like 1 month ago, voted in Parliament on the question of energy and gender. And today, women were not the ones that polluted and damaged the world. It's a fact, because women were not in the places where they took the decision, but also the consumption aspect was really a man aspect for a very long time. So the women's, if you see it as a big number, in the world, they have not, and they could be the ones today suffering the most of all of these energy things, specifically vulnerable women with children and all of this, energy precarity, all of the jobs that are, for example, we thought when we did the big recovery plans in EU, there's a lot of money that has been put for energy, new energies and all that. We think a lot of big technical things where all the men have jobs, and we don't think where women have jobs. And the same when we have been, for more and more, our big cities are forbidding a certain number of cars to come in because they are the polluting cars, which is very good because the air on most of our big cities is today very dangerous for children, elderly people, vulnerable people. So it's very important, but at the same time, those that have the polluting cars are often women. They are often women alone, and they're often women that have very specific jobs like midwives, nurses, independent liberals, and all of this. All of these women that have little shops in centers. Little shops in centers are very much rented by women that have a one job, aesthetics or makeup or clothes or all of this, and they cannot pay energy anymore, heating in winter and all of this. So the gender perspective is very intelligent and important. Of course, the question, as I already said a lot, so I will not repeat the question. I want really to put a focus on where are the workshops of our industries, and where do we get the raw materials and all of this, and how we really need to envisage this in a global way to not pollute when we are getting better in EU. And then, of course, there's the question of how we also go on doing climate diplomacy, because I mean, it's been said and we said again, Russia, China, all of these countries are not going to go in our way as easily as we would like. We also don't know what will be the issue in USA after the next election, and what will be our relation with the other side of the Atlantic. So the question of green diplomacy needs to still be a focus. As a conclusion, I wanted to just say that there's one difficult issue, is the question of biodiversity and having sacralized place for nature. There again, we cannot just ask the rest of the world of having sacralized places. So, you know, we ask Brazil to be careful about the Amazon, and we ask Africa to be some African countries to be careful about some other big primary forests and all of this, and Asia, and then we would not do anything, and we could use all of our land. This is really something I think we should be very careful about. We need also to sacralize land in EU, and it's of course in competition with agriculture. It's also in competition with the new maybe industries that we need to create. But this is something, and this is a very difficult polemic issue. This is probably the one that will stay the most difficult until the end. Again, if we don't want to take everything from outside and we want to have our own raw material, we will need also to do some mining and some sort of things in EU. And that is sometimes in places that are sacralized nature today. So these issues are going to become very, very difficult in the next years, I would say. And it will need a lot of discussion and intelligence on all parts. Not everyone staying in its fortress, but really trying to work together, because there's no easy answers. It's not true to say that on one side or the other there's no easy answer. And very last point, of course, climate, big changes are going to destroy some parts of the planet. So we will have to come back on this topic of migration. I mean, it's just not possible the EU goes on closing its doors as much as it's doing at the moment, even hypocritically asking European women to do more children, like the French president did a few weeks ago, which is very dangerous. I mean, Orban had been saying that, and others. We have demographic deficit in EU, and at the same time, we're not accepting migrants that are the climate migrants are going to become more and more numerous. They will be in the next years huge. We have the war migrants already. We have all sorts of migrants, but the climate migrants, we already have some, but not as much as we will get in the next years, when some places of the world are going to become completely non-habitable. So that will put the focus on migration again on the table of EU.
Many thanks for this very rich and very concrete also presentation. I just if it's very difficult to summarize because you raise a lot of points, but I notice the social dimension, and in particular the problem of poverty, that is really a key issue now. And so the impact of going ahead with environmental new technologies and the protection will create more social problems in Europe, but in a wider context. The gender dimension is also very important. The climate change will have an impact for the way that we perceive our societies, and particularly the inclusive societies we would like to promote. The need to reinforce climate diplomacy in view of the US election by the end of the year. The difficulties to tackle issues concerning the biodiversity. This is a very complex issue for which more work has to be done. You raise also the very complex new issue on migration and the climate. It's forced displacement. People, they are forcibly displaced. So it's de facto looking for to move. We have to find a solution. You raise also the issue of strategic autonomy of the EU, because you mentioned the material we need in order to finance our transition due to due diligence or more environmental friendly production and ways to live. So we saw in the chat several questions. I saw now Michelangelo also raised their hand. But Michelangelo, I have already one specific question from Guido. I will start with Guido. I will give him the floor. And then Catherine Vieidon, and then Christophe, and then you will have the floor, Michelangelo. Please be precise in order to have a constructive exchange. Guido, you have the floor. Thanks.
Thank you. Let me say that I am really happy for this meeting because it is a turning point in our work. The work has a clear goal to have a common position between European Federalists and World Federalists. And I think that today we are approaching this kind of goal because the idea that the Global Green Deal is already in the program of the Green Parties is a big achievement. And I think that we, in our modest work, we are able to achieve this goal. So I see 2 points to be developed. I talk only about our work and our future goals. The first is the problem raised by Fernando at the beginning, that is, it is important to have a common commission, a common working group between the European and World Federalists. I think that that should be done, and that is a problem we should put at the order of the day of the two movements. The second point is that the goal of a global Green Deal is very important, but we have also to see if other beyond the Greens, other progressive parties in the European Parliament will accept this kind of goal. So I think that is a common work we should be able to do in the next few months before the European election. I hope that some result can be get, but it is difficult. And but there is a further point, which is for the future. That is when even if we think that a global Green Deal is could become a common goal for all the progressive forces, for all political parties, it is important to discuss the contents of the global Green Deal, because you don't have only a name. We need not only a name, but we should think about a kind of governance of a global Green Deal. That is the big point we should discuss in the future. That's all. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Guido. Catherine? If Catherine is not available, then Roland, if he's still here. Christoph? Okay. Then Michelangelo and then Nicolas.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I don't have what? Daphne has a stomach tick.
Sorry, I think Catherine is back now. Michelangelo, would you like to raise your question, and then I will give the floor to Catherine.
Yes, but it's not a question, but an observation about the different interest about the Green Deal, because the European Union want to act like an actor, a political role promoting this important initiative, but also, according to me, the European Union has to have a role challenge that is twice. One is actor and one is institutional, in order to managing the different interests like transport, energy, and Europe and the trade union as the social dimension. Briefly,